Let's talk.
Charles Brown.
The Years of the Wizard. The Years of the Wizard is a strange history and home life of Renaissance magicians. It's written by Rachel Morris. It's been described as a lyrical and highly atmospheric exploration of the lives of Renaissance magicians. And here joining me this morning to tell me all about it is Rachel Morris. Rachel, are you receiving me?
Sorry, say that again.
Can you hear me, Rachel?
I can.
Marvellous. Tell us a little bit about then what led you to the lives of Renaissance magicians. How did this all sort of start for you?
What took me to it was I came across the story of a man called John Dee, who was an Elizabethan. We would probably consider him to be a complete madman. Back then, he was considered entirely sensible. He believed that he was a magician, and everyone around him believed the same thing. He was the kind of magician who wanted to understand why the world began, when it would end, all those kind of big questions. But what really caught my imagination was that his diaries have survived. And the diaries tell you not only about his big ideas, but also about his wife and his children. And what you get from them is the sense of a man with an obsession, pursuing these amazing ideas in his house, which was down beside the Thames at Mortlake. Whilst outside in the garden, the kids are playing and they're doing all the things that children do. And one of them falls in the river and, all those little things. And you got one of those feelings when you realise that he was both incredibly strange, but in another way, just like any other man with an obsession. And then it just caught my imagination.
Because one of the things is that we sort of think that, the Elizabethan age, it's very, very sober. It's very, very strict, and people know what they're doing. And Elizabeth the First has come to the throne, and there are all sorts of sort of religious machinations going on. The great sort of struggle between Protestants and Catholics, and yet people were fascinated by mages, by people who could see into the future. And it doesn't sort of fit, I suppose, into perhaps our worldview, because we just think she's concerned with Francis Drake, Sir Walter Raleigh, singeing the King of Spain's beard, proper geopolitics, in this sort of early modern age, and not consulting with people who have got fantastic libraries.
Yes, and his library was to die for. He adored his library. But yeah, the bigger point is it's true. We tend to see in the past what we want to see and what we understand. And the stuff we don't understand, we tend to ignore. But Elizabeth rated him very highly. She took his advice very seriously. And he was, as well as these grand and to us crazy ambitions to understand the meaning of the world, he was a very good mathematician, and he could give you very sensible advice on how to make the journey across the Atlantic, the navigational side of travelling to the New World. So he had that side which we recognise, but he also had this, they all believed that the end of the world was coming shortly. And they, startling ideas which make us go, wow, could they really have been preoccupied with things like that? And yet they were.
The other thing is the fact that, is he not skating a very dangerous path between, okay, he works out the coordinates of how to travel huge distances, but we are in a world where the devil is real and a real and present danger. People believe in the end of the world. You are very close to talking heresy here. Is he skating that line, Rachel? Is he at the beginning of his career? Because it's quite a spectacular and sad sort of fall from grace. Is he secure in his position? Does he not have any witchfinder generals knocking on the door saying, well, actually that text is has been forbidden for years and years?
It's true that you had to be very careful back then if you were pursuing these kind of ideas. The church did not like them at all. But at the beginning of all this, when Elizabeth was still young, there was a much more hopeful atmosphere. And when people are hopeful, they tend not to worry about this kind of thing so much. It's as the century wore on and the atmosphere got a bit darker that he got in. He had to be more careful. And yes, I mean, the other thing is that if you were a man and you were upper class, you had a better chance of playing around with these ideas than if you were working class and, say, a woman. So that was the witches. So there was another kind of magic back then, which was the magic of angels and witches and fairies and that kind of thing. And that was much more rural and it was more working class. And women who got involved in that were easily taken for witches. And then they got into real trouble. But John Dee, on the whole, with one or two exceptions, trod a careful line and got through.
So he's he's upper class stroke, sort of almost aristocracy. He's got connections to the court, and that is how he gets noticed. Because I can't see that Henry VIII, at the end of his life, was particularly would be particularly into any of this sort of stuff, unless it made him more potent, for example, Rachel. So how does he? What did you discover about a two-pronged question? A, how he gets noticed by court, and B, how his long-suffering wife is introduced to him. Is this a marriage of love, or is it almost sort of as marriages were back in Elizabeth? Is it almost arranged? That's a two-pronged one for you, Rachel.
So she was a very long-suffering wife. Her name was Jane Dee. She was quite a bit younger than him. The impression you get from the diaries is that she loved him. And actually, you also get the impression that he loved her. So love is a bit difficult to pin down over the centuries, but that's the feeling you get. So they married at the end of the 1570s. She started having children. She had 7 or 8 in all. And it was a very domestic setup. And then there came a time when he wanted to go to Prague, which, are you ready for Prague? So he wants to go to Prague, and it's the occult capital of Europe. In Prague, there are all kinds of people, artists, philosophers, poets, all kinds of people, and they gather there. And it must have been very compelling. I would have wanted to go to Prague if I'd been then. And he decides to go because he's going to pursue his magic in Prague. And he's going to take his children and his wife because he loves them. And he's also going to take his favourite books, which are about 800 of his really special books. And he's also going to take the man who is the medium, because he needed a medium, because, you see, he believed he could call up the angels, but he didn't believe that he could hear or speak to them. He needed a medium to do that. And the medium's name was Edward Kelly. So Edward Kelly came along, and with him came Edward Kelly's wife and Edward Kelly's 2 stepchildren. It must have been an amazing cavalcade of people making their way across Europe in the winter of 1583. And they arrive, and they have various adventures. They're away for quite some number of years. But there comes a point when Edward Kelly says to John Dee, the angels are requiring us to do a wife swap. Mm-hmm. And at this point, I'm reading the diaries at this point, and at this point you go, what? Where did that come from? And of course, John Dee can't contradict this because he can't hear the angels. He has to trust his medium. And he does protest, but his medium says, look, the angels are saying that if we do this, North will be united with South and East with West, and harmony will fall upon the world. And you go, what? So John Dee went along with it. He had to coerce his wife. She did not want to do this at all, but she did it for him. In the end, she did it for him. Of course, at this point, reading the diaries, you go, well, did that work the other way around too? Did John Dee sleep with the other wife? And then the language is very ambiguous, but you kind of get the impression that the other wife kind of slid out of the deal. She talked her way out of it, which kind of matches with the few things we know about her. That feels plausible. And then the next thing you read in the diaries is that the medium, Edward Kelly, is claiming that a beautiful golden woman has come to him, and she is so beautiful, and she is all things to all men, and anyone would love her. And then another woman is appearing, and she's saying, but don't tell the wives. At which point your head spins, because it feels like the 1960s. And to this day, nobody can quite make sense of this. Nobody has a sensible answer to what was going on, except that it's possible that Edward Kelly didn't have children of his own. Did he want a child? Because Jane Dee had 6, 7, she just got pregnant very easily, you see. What happened then was that rapidly it became clear that Jane was pregnant. By the time the baby was born, the two men fell out big time. And all this sort of psychologically makes sense. You would fall out if you hadn't fallen out before in those circumstances. Edward Kelly went east and John Dee came home to London. And at that point, although it's as if he paid the price instantly because his world fell apart. He came home to find his beloved library was trashed. He was out of favour at the court. He had no money. He got sent up north to Manchester, where he was never happy. And his wife and 2 of his children died of the plague. So, oh my God, he paid. And he came home to Mortlake, where he lived alone in sort of semi-poverty with his daughter, Catherine.
Mm. You see, one of the things about Dee that strikes me is that he seems to be one of those, and we've all met them, who've got great academic prowess. You know, they're buried in their books, but they've got no common sense. And they can, and, you know, and as for Kelly, he is that smooth talking sort of high, you know, grifter and the whole thing. Let's go to Prague. Let's try and, you know, alchemy's massive. Everybody's trying to make gold, right? So let's go to, and it's interesting he said that he's seen a golden woman, etc. Let's go to Prague. They're into it. We can manufacture gold. And the original introduction to Prague is, you know, they are fated, aren't they? Because he's very famous by the time, you know, in those circles. So they get introductions, don't they, to various, you know, even the king of, or whatever, the Duke of, the king of Prague. Yeah, the emperor, excuse me. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think that has some version of that has to be what was going on. He was a man with absolutely no common sense at all. He was all intellect and absolutely no sense. But read the diaries. He's not an unattractive bloke as a person. You're right about Edward Kelly, I think, except that I would say that Edward Kelly was spinning a lie. He kept this lie going for 7 years. I mean, it was a long time to keep a lie going. And he did. And he talked. Edward Kelly must have been a great talker. He talked and talked and talked. But he spun this whole world of the angels and this angel and that angel. And the angels had backstories. He kept it going in a way that was quite remarkable. I mean, you read it and think he could have been a novelist. Do you know what I mean? He had that imagination. He too, I may say, came to a sticky end. He was taken up by somebody further east into Poland. He promised he could make gold. It looked for a little while like he might be able to, and then it failed, and he was put into jail. And then he tried to escape and injured himself and died. So that's how Edward Kelly ended. So both of them, you know, from their grand ambitions, they fell way, way down.
So when it comes to writing the story from the family perspective, I mean, blimey, how do you sort of write this without imposing 21st century? I mean, it's a big enough sort of mind trip as it is. You know, okay, I can see the angels, but only if I can get hold of your rather attractive and younger wife. From that point of view, without obviously, let's drop a woke in because it's Monday, without going full woke, because it is a different time. But still, Rachel, I mean, it must have been, you must have been utilizing your full, or do you just delve into the diaries and the writings and go, right, okay, so point A, point B, point C?
So you're right that you have to acknowledge the strangeness of it all as well as the familiarity. In the end, I thought of writing it completely as a novel, but then you would lose that sense of, wow, strange but true, you know. On the other hand, if I wrote it absolutely 100% as nonfiction, you wouldn't really be able to bring alive the women and the children and their point of view. So in the end, the majority of it is nonfiction, but I did interpose a few short stories here and there to try and say, what was it like to be Jane D? What was it like to be his kids? And the thing about fiction is that you write it based upon building connections between yourself and the characters. And they're harder to build when the world is strange. You've got to acknowledge the strangeness of that world as well as the familiarity. So it took me a little while to work out the shape of it and to make it as readable as possible and to bring the characters alive, but to never lose that tension of, but this is so strange.
At the same time, through Europe, I mean, this is a strange story. But if you think about what is going on, you're talking about sort of Prague being the esoteric capital of the universe. Italy's, I mean, okay, it's not Italy at this point, but we've got five or six popes running around. We've got the Borgias and Medici and mad saints and pregnant popes, and it is all. We see, if you think that the Renaissance is all ordered, forget it, because it's absolutely kicking off in Florence, for example, and as for the Holy Roman Empire, I mean, let's let him get me started on that one.
No, it's true. I think we tend to think of the Renaissance as all sort of controlled, calm, and everything very beautiful languages. Excuse me.
That's all right. That's probably one of the Magias phoning in to disagree.
Yes, if you say, "What are you saying about us?" That's probably true. So we misunderstand the Renaissance totally if we think it was calm. It was never calm.
And it's interesting as well that you say when he gets back, it's a different picture, which it is, because he's been gone for 7 years, and there have been all sorts of plots and counterplots, and Elizabeth dealing with Mary, Queen of Scots, etc., etc. She's got hardened. Is there, when you come to do this, is there any trace of them in Mortlake anymore? I mean, I know it's now a part of Greater London almost, but I mean, are there still traces?
The thing about that's one of the strangenesses of this world. There's not a lot left of any of it. In Mortlake, where obviously I went, because who wouldn't? His house is gone, though we know where it was. The whole Tudor village mostly has gone, except the centre of the church. The church tower, I think, parts of the church are definitely from John Dee's time. In general, if you're going looking for this world, the evidence that survives of it are either books, because they were very booky, they loved their books, or you will find, if you're looking for things like alchemy, you will find the glass jars and that kind of thing to an extent. So as an example, the Museum of the History of Science in Oxford was the original Ashmolean Museum. It was built towards the end of the 17th century, but the the first curator there, a man called Robert Plott, appears to have had alchemical interests, from what we can tell. And recently, in the last generation or so, they did some archaeological excavations around the back of the museum and discovered a lot of the very typical glass jars which were used for alchemical experiments. So there's a fair amount of evidence of that kind just hanging around that very first building. The other place to go is the old libraries, like the Bodleian, for instance, which do have they have those kind of books. They have alchemical books. And the other thing to know is that John Dee signed all his books, or mostly he signed his books, and he also doodled in his books. He was a great doodler. And they're beautiful doodles, I have to say to him. Lovely drawings, sometimes. It is now possible to trace the last of his books by the evidence of his signature and so on. And if you wanted to find some of them, one place to go is Cheetham's Library in Manchester, where they have, I think, 5 of John Dee's books.
When you said his library had been ransacked, I mean, was this just chances, or was it other people thinking, right, he's in Prague, I'm going to sort of sneak in and see what he's got, or was it just people having a look and thinking, right, he's a magician, he's a rich guy, I'm going to see what he's got in there, or was it? Do you think it was taken by other aspiring alchemists, magists, philosophers, and various ne'er-do-wells?
Posh ne'er-do-wells.
They're the worst type, I tell you.
So, the answer is, for sure, some of them were taken by people who wanted those books because they themselves were into this kind of thing. And books were very valuable then, because we're not that far after the invention of printing. And so books are still rare and they're still valuable. But there were probably other books that went because people just broke in. And because magic had this ambivalent status, it is possible that people broke in and took books out of sense of disapproval. Who is this man? What is he doing messing around with this heretical stuff? We want his books. So I think there were probably multiple motivations. But not all the books went, but a large chunk went. And some very loyal 20th century scholars have been tracking them down with a sort of sense of building, I think, the digital version of his original museum. So they can't summon the books back, but they can digitally recreate it, if you know what I mean.
And one of the great things that you've done is you've recreated the lives of, because we scoot over women in, unless they are heretics or loose women or Henry VIII doesn't like them, so has them executed. We don't hear about them, only in the side notes, because it's written by men and normally monks or something like that. So what is wonderful about this is that you are saying they had a voice, they had an agency. It's far too easy to just go, oh, it was men only, when it absolutely wasn't. And we're seeing, thankfully, women historians pointing out the importance of women in history.
I think that is so true. To which I would also add the children. Nobody writes about the children, but they too had a life, and they're interesting too. But the question of women actually doing alchemy, for instance, there is some evidence. No, there's a fair amount of evidence for that. It's generally upper class women, because alchemy is expensive. You need all the equipment, you need the time, you need the books, you need the knowledge. But there were women also exploring alchemy. Back then, astrology was considered a science, and there were women doing astrology. So it was by no means just a male thing. That said, it was easier for men to do it. Your best chance, if you were a woman and wanted to do this kind of thing, was to learn it from your family, from your father or your brother or your husband, and then to be a woman of means, to have the money to explore it. But that is not surprising. That's what you expect from history. But it was incredibly satisfying to imagine the women and imagine what they were up to. That, for me, was one of the lovely things about writing it.
The book is called The Years of the Wizard, The Strange History and Home Life of Renaissance Magicians. It's by Rachel Morris, who we're speaking to now. Rachel, and listeners, if you go onto the Talk Radio Europe bookshop, click on the virtual bookstop, click on the great front cover, and it'll be winging its way to you. Rachel, if people want to find more about you, I mean, do you have a website? Are you on social media? Where can people find you and say lovely things to you?
You can definitely find me on Instagram. I'm Rachel Morris _writer. So you can find me there. And I look at it most days and I do answer questions, definitely. Send me questions, send me ideas. I'm always interested.
Wonderful stuff indeed. The book is called The Years of the Wizard. It's by Rachel Morris. Rachel, thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. I've loved it. Thank you.